3rd. We are currently in session. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What is that?
The first step is
Portable recorder.
to get our agenda in order. There are 2 items that we will be tabling for future conversation for the next board meeting, and that will be fiscal 3.2, Catalan and Merlini resolution, and the special ed 3.5. And we'll discuss that and come back next on October 8th. Are there any other items that anybody would like pulled? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next topic is the items that were pulled, which would be donations. And I'm always amazed at how generous people are and the efforts that people make to get these, to get the extra benefits for schools. There are 7, and they range from a donation from Target to BB Elementary School. Furnace Woods is a donation as well. New York Life, another parent who made the effort to get the matching funds. A donation from the Barbara Katzenstein Scholarship Fund, and again, I'm always amazed at how generous people are, because even the fact that they do it anonymously, nobody looks for any credit for it. They just are willing to do so. Another target for the Furnace Woods, a donation from the HHCEF, which was for $6,903 for the Hendrick Hudson for the high school, I believe, for a digital art studio. Thank you very much to the HHCEF. I know how much work goes into getting that much money together. And $500 from IBM to Frank G. Lindsay. And again, that's Mr. Donahue. Again, he does this every year, and I know that he puts in for it, and it's a wonderful thing. The other item for donation was to the Hendrick Hudson School District for the purpose of creating a locker room for some of the indoor teams. Joe, you've been in contact with this individual?
Yeah, this is a group of alumni who have put some funding together that want to give back, and there's some space down by the gymnasium that they would like to donate some materials and equipment and labor and turn some dead space into a team room, which would be used for volleyball, basketball, as well as potentially a spring sport. So with your accepting this, we can order the materials and hopefully have it done before the season kicks off at the end of November. And the donors will come to a future board meeting and show some plans and pictures of what a finished product will look like. They just weren't available tonight.
Terrific. So, if I can get a motion to approve.
Actually, just wanted to acknowledge the HHCEF on the work that they did for the Digital Art Studio. It was a teacher, Jessica Nash, who applied for that. We got brand new equipment, including computers, digital cameras, lighting, and a large format printer. I know we had worked for a long time to get a photography studio in a photography class in the high school, so that was, a long time coming and a lot of hard work from HHCF, but we appreciate it.
Can I get a motion to approve the donations as described? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And that would bring us to audience comments. Okay. Next.
Step right up.
I'll wait.
No, come ahead.
It's okay. I'm good. I'll be here a while. I'll wait till then.
There you go. Superintendent's report.
All right, I have a couple updates, and then we'll turn it over to Alice to lead our presentations. One is the proposed pipeline, the Algonquin pipeline led by Spectra. We had a number of public forums last week. The board 2 weeks ago passed a resolution. We sent a letter to FERC opposing the current path because of its proximity to Buchanan-Verplanck. Earlier this evening, Buchanan-Verplanck Elementary School had a PTA information night for parents. I know the other PTAs are interested in replicating that. Tonight's meeting will be online, and we'll get you a link to that meeting. The high school was named a Newsweek top high school. That came out last couple weeks, and hopefully Jim will talk about that a little bit later in greater detail. But a lot of good news, and that's not just a high school recognition, but everyone who works with kids in their district. That's a recognition for everyone who has been able to work with our children all the way from kindergarten, certainly through graduation. Shortly, we'll be able to announce a handful of our high school musicians were selected for All-State, both vocal, choral programs, and instrumental music. They'll perform at the Eastman Theater first weekend in December in Rochester. That's a huge opportunity for our kids, and we'll announce them shortly. And recently, about an hour and a half ago, one of our own, Diane Swartfager, won her celebrated her 500th victory as a girls volleyball coach. The girls volleyball team knocked off Panis in 3 straight games.
That's awesome.
So that happened about an hour and a half ago and is on Twitter. So we're all caught up to date.
It's been on Twitter for about an hour, like 29 minutes.
That's right.
I'm sure.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much. The next is committee reports. Are there any that anybody would like? No?
Do policy, Carol?
I'll jump a couple of them. You want to talk about Spectrum?
I think we already talked about that.
Well, the one thing that did come out at that meeting,
You have to really, because our speaker system's not working.
We have no
speaking
audio.
as loud as I can.
Well,
Okay.
they're still telling us
Awesome
it's
job.
like-
Okay. The one very important part about the Spectrum meeting, the new pipeline that is proposed to go by BV is a new right-of-way and a new easement. There's another path that it could go, but it'll take advocacy to get them to change their mind to go the other way. Because this way they're looking to fast track the project, and this is the fastest way to go. But it happens to pass within 400 feet, 450 feet of 350 sold. So that's the thing that we can still talk about and advocate for. Because there is another way it could go. It could turn and go up Broadway. It would just take longer to get improved for that. So that was one thing from that. I went to the SEPTA meeting last night. It's pretty much the same program I think we'll see tonight with a lot of Ms. Rafala came and talked to the SEPTA group about the EPS program and different things last night. I was so impressed. She went through a 10-page slide in about 2 minutes, and everybody understood it. But then there was a very good discussion afterward. The one thing I like to do was we talked about the board core goals and how we're going forward, and I was able to discuss those. And when I go to the PTA groups, we've been talking about that. I went to BV's first PTA meeting last month, and Joe came in and talked about that, and we talked about those things too. And the district's administrative focus this year on instructional effective instruction. What does it look like and how does it go? So those are the things. It's useful to talk about what's our focus going forward this year. What is effective instruction? What does it look like? And those are the things that we want to really focus on this year. And our core goal is to improve the college and career-ready graduation rate. And that takes effective instruction. How does that look in the buildings? How does it look in the schools?
Policy.
Policy.
Yeah.
Facilities.
I'm not on facilities.
Facilities, Matt, we talked about we were talking about possibly getting solar power for our buildings. And we're looking at it and discussing the ramifications with Siemens, and so we're still talking about it. It was a useful meeting.
That's been an ongoing discussion.
Yes.
In policy, we're continuing to tweak our policies on within district movement. So if you change houses while your kids are in elementary school, which we're sort of moved from one elementary school to the other, we're still kind of hashing that out and trying to decide what the best way to word that. We're also looking at some regulations and policies with regards to food trucks.
All right. Thank you very much. Did I forget anything?
We have some things in development, but
Yeah,
we can.
nothing that
Okay.
nothing that's presented.
Well, then that brings us to our presentation discussion. That would be the grades 3 through 8, the assessment results.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm looking for a pointer, I'm looking for all kinds of things. We're low tech tonight. Can we open my presentation? So this doesn't have.
For your PowerPoint? Nope.
It's the first one. The
No, it's not that.
not this.
No,
I'll run the agenda.
no.
This one.
So is this what?
No,
Okay, so, it's miraculous what we do. Okay, so anyway, thank you, Jim. I'm going to stand here because this is not doing anything either. All right, so I'm presenting to you our results from the state testing from last spring. And we've learned over the years there are a couple of ways to look at this data that can make some sense, because the tests are not consistent from year to year. And at best, we have 2 years that are similar, the past 2 years. So I'm going to show you data that's like that, Jim. I wish I could be. Is there any way to scroll this? So.
yeah.
Okay,
we
good.
can-
So we're not going to dwell on each school's, the 3rd grade ELA, the 4th grade ELA, the 5th grade ELA. It's on board docs. You can certainly open it up and look at it yourselves. There are areas that are terrific that show growth and areas that I'm worried about. And when you look at this data, you can, it doesn't take rocket science to know where we're worried. But I would like to go to the 4th one, not the 4th grade, the next one. No, next slide, Jim.
Next slide.
And the next slide is 5th grade ELA. And the next slide shows the growth. No, that's 5th grade ELA. The next slide, please. This one. Okay. So what I tried to do here is to show this data in a couple of different ways. First of all, I showed the spring 2013 testing and the spring 2014 testing, because these tests are at least the same tests, same Common Core tests. They're somewhat similar, and the cut scores are somewhat similar. So if you look at our BV 3rd grade results, I looked at it from students who scored a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4, and then I added it up, a 2, a 3, and a 4. And as you'll hear from Kathy Connolly, who's here from Southern Westchester BOCES, to talk about the lab status, the 2s count now. You get some credit for the 2s. It's partial proficiency. It's not quite there yet, but we're looking at it. The 3 and the 4, of course, is the goal, and the 2, 3, and 4 is kids who are on track to graduate from high school. The 2s, 3s, and 4s. So if you look at our, BV from 3rd grade last year to 4th grade this year, there's some growth. If you look from Frank G. Lindsay, the 2, 3, and 4, there's some growth, but not the 3s and 4s. And if you look at Furnace Woods from 3rd to 4th grade, they had some nice growth. Okay, and you see the same in 5th grade if you look, and you can see where there was growth and where there's some room for concern. So Jim, if you could go down to, just scroll down a little bit, it's on the New York State. Okay, I put in these numbers, just to, if you want to really scour this data, we're well ahead of the New York State averages. We should be. We are not ahead of Westchester Putnam. And we're in the same place we've been for years. It's exactly the same as it's been for years. We fall in the third quartile in Westchester, Putnam counties. And we have some places that we sneak into the second quartile, but since we started looking at this data with Dan, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we're pretty consistent. We're looking for our own growth, however. We've decided we have to push for our own growth. So go to third grade math just for a second. We have to celebrate the fact that 45% of our third graders at Furnace Woods were level 4. I mean, we just have to recognize that. That's pretty great. And that's way up high in the county. So, we can do it. Okay. Go through the fourth grade math, and go through the fifth grade math, and please get to the slide that shows the growth again, the cohort data. So again, we had greater growth in math than we had in ELA. We worked very, very hard in math last year. So thankfully we had greater growth in math, and you can see it as you look across. Okay, you can see. Pretty nice in math. Okay, and again, we're in some places close to Westchester Putnam. When you get close to the middle of this county, that's pretty good. It's pretty high achieving county. And again, this data is, it's available for you to scour. Then we look at Blue Mountain, and again, we've got this same. This is just 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade across 2 years. But go to the next slide. The next slide is math, and then finally go to the comparing slide. And please note that our 8th graders, which looks like such awful results in math, our 8th graders taking algebra did not take the math 8 assessment. So we took the top students right out of that testing, the highest achieving students. And it's very interesting when you look at the Westchester Putnam results, I would say about 60% of the districts in our region did the same thing, and you can absolutely tell where they really didn't have any force, because those kids were taking the algebra regions.
How many kids is that?
It's about 75 kids
75
out of 200.
We were proportionately at our middle school, we were collecting data regionally on opt-outs by grade level, by math, by ELA. And just at a quick look at the numbers, back in late spring, it appeared we had a greater proportion of our middle schoolers opting out compared to other districts that reported that data.
Mm-hmm. And I put that data, I put a slide in for the opt-outs. But these were not, the children who took the algebra regions didn't opt out of the testing. We didn't test them in both, the 8th grade test and the algebra test.
So those kids probably would have been 3s and 4s.
They absolutely would have been.
This was the first year they didn't have to take both.
Right. It was the first year that we had this option. We did it for the kids. It's a lot of testing to have to take the 8th grade test. And, we try to think about the children as best we can. And this was for the kids.
For the opt-outs, did you ever analyze why the parents was there ever any follow-up as to why they chose not to?
I'll show you some data on that. Okay, now let's look at this. So stay put.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'd like to, just if you look at our 8th grade ELA results, they're consistently good. And, we've said to you many times, the longer we have the kids, the better they do. And our 8th grade, that's great, actually. And we even looking at, not only the state, much better than the state, but pretty close to the median in the county. And, this is a high achieving part of the world we live in. There's a lot of competition here, as you know. 5th grade math was pretty great, considering. So, I don't mean 5th grade, I mean 6th grade. So there are pockets of excellence, and there are pockets of great concern. And I think we know that, and we all know that. So if we go to the next slide, please. I looked at the refusals. The families who refused did it for a couple of reasons. There were some that were highly political, And they pulled out because Rob Astorino told families to in this area, as you recall, back in the spring, as a way to say no to the Common Core. And of course, that's a family's right. And there were other families who just didn't want to put their kids through that amount of testing. So I scoured through the scores that the kids had the year before. So the kids who were fifth graders who opted out, what they did in fourth grade. And when I looked at there were 25 students across our district, that's not a huge number, who opted out of ELA. And 5 of those children, 5 of the 25, scored a level 3 or a 4 the year before. So the other 20 were a 1 or 2. And when I looked at the math, 47, the math was the second test. It was a week later, and people had awakened to the fact that you could opt out or refuse to take the test. So 47 families refused the test for their children in math. And of that 47, 7 scored a level 3 or 4 the year before, and all the rest were a 1 or a 2. So, we can't put too much weight on that. It's not like we would have had higher scores if those kids had taken the test, not significantly. Okay, so, this is all well and good, but what are we going to do about it? Several years ago, the federal law told us we had to have a universal screener, and we used AIMSweb for children in kindergarten through 5th grade to identify who was at risk for needing more help in reading. And the testing has become more sophisticated over time. AIMSweb no longer does, it always does what it did, but we have assessments that do more. So we're using AIMSweb for our kindergarten through 2nd graders, just because fluency is a measure that you look at, how fluent they are reading words in kindergarten through 2nd grade. But we have significant assessment possibilities with the Engage New York reading program we're using, and the skill strand of this reading program. Not only does it have constant assessment, but it gives teachers diagnostic information of where to go for children, for specific children, based on the results of these monthly or so assessments, the formative assessments. So it gives us much greater in-depth information than we got from AIMSweb. First time we're using it, but first time anyone's using it.
How's the data captured? AIMSweb was computerized?
No.
No?
AIMSweb was just how many words per minute children read in passages that were on their grade level. Their fluency, there's a lot of research that suggests fluency of that nature, suggests reading comprehension, because you can't read fluently if you don't know what you're reading. Basically that's the theory. But there's so much more to it than that. So the assessments are specific to what the kids are learning, and it has to do with attaining phonics knowledge, phonemic awareness knowledge, comprehension, and will give teachers formative diagnostic information to form their groups.
Who captures the information?
The teachers do.
Is
The
there
teachers do, as they sit with
constantly
kids. Yeah, it's not computerized. 3rd through 5th grade, with many other districts in our region, we're looking at this iReady assessment, and we used it for the first time, and we like very much what we're seeing. Some of the teachers are nodding. Luann will be okay. Asked to get the math part, which I have to find money for it, so that she can assess the math for her kids at Frenchy Lindsay. But not only are we getting a scale that takes the children through 3rd grade through 6th grade, we're using it in 6th grade as well, but we get specific diagnostic information for teachers to use in their small group instruction based on this, on-demand assessment that's done online. And it's attractive as well. The kids had fun with it. So it's not a heinous assessment. And we got good information from it. So the more information we have for teachers, the better. And I'm looking at the teachers because I think they like what they saw the first time around. And when you see the information they get, I hope you like it. Well, it's pretty cool. That's great. Okay, that's good. That's what we like to see. So that's one thing that's new. So the challenge was having better assessment and meeting it with better tools. So one is higher than the other, Jim. One screen. Okay. Charles?
Oh, go ahead, you're gonna.
Okay, so the next piece that's new in literacy, we had full math modules to use from Engage New York last year, and we saw that it made somewhat of a difference, and we're hoping it will continue to make a difference. We now have ELA materials to use, and we're implementing those consistently in our schools. So they're on a much higher level than the Storytown, which was absolutely appropriate when we bought it, but we've moved on. You know, we've got new standards and a new way of looking at reading, and a much more in-depth use of text for kids and use of information as they read and write. So we're hoping, and along with the rest of New York State, we're adopting these materials. The kindergarten through second grade is based on a listening, it's very interesting teaching. It's based on a listening and learning strand for literacy, to build background knowledge and to build just the base of knowledge for all children K through 2. That's one piece of it, and they're doing Greek myths in second grade. They're doing wonderful stuff, and it's the classics, very much so. And there's also a skill strand, which is half of the program, and that, quite frankly, is to help kids break the code, learn how to read, and through second grade. And then finally, you're going to see information about GRARE. This is nothing new, it's just a new word. You've heard about guided reading for a long time. That's small group instruction when you work with kids on their level, and accountable independent reading. And this is kids reading on their own, but they're accountable for it in some way. So we've got the reading with the listening and speaking strand, listening and learning strand. We've got the skill strand, and we've got the guided reading and accountable independent reading. So it's looking like 3 hours of literacy in elementary classrooms, pretty much. We need to do it.
One question. We're moving into the Engage New York. I know several years ago we talked a lot about differentiation in the elementary classroom. And how
The
that
differentiation comes in the GRARE and in the support that, in the guided reading groups as a result of the work on the assessments in the domains. So it's full class instruction for the listening and learning part, because we're building knowledge at that point. But when we're really going into breaking the code, when kids are at every kind of level you can imagine, that's where the differentiation comes in.
Is that the same in the math modules? Because that was
Yes
one of
and
the
no. The
complaints
math-
I'd heard about
The math, as teachers are becoming comfortable in learning how to work with the math modules, they're learning to bring back their math centers. And something we'll talk about in a minute when we get to math. Okay, so, yeah, that's so important, Charles. And teachers are missing the center time they had, because real instruction takes place in those small groups. Okay. Thanks, Jim. Okay, along with using the diagnostic material, we are building consistent criteria for entrance and for exit from reading support programs in our 3 elementary schools. And this is something that we've been talking about for years, but until you have a reliable tool, very hard to implement. But we feel we have the reliable tools now. And we've got momentum in math, and it's pretty exciting what's happening in classrooms with math. But this year, and thank you so much for supporting this, we have a math coach in each elementary school. And these coaches are working with teachers, working with children, working with the materials, we'll be helping teachers interpret data. In the math program, there are the same kind of monthly assessments, and having someone to really help break down the information they're getting from these assessments should be tremendously helpful. And I don't think there's anyone who's unhappy about having these math coaches in the schools. So
I was
thank
thinking
you.
of Barbara.
I know, Barbara's not even here.
I know.
And she's been fighting for it forever.
Exactly. She was the most vocal of everybody.
Right, so we bless you for that. Okay, thanks, Jim. Okay, you heard a little bit about the goal, the board goal earlier, and as part of what we're doing to address, the work in math and literacy, I talked about the GRARE. It's a district-wide focus, K-5. 6 through 12, we're focusing on literacy in the content areas. That's reading and writing from text and about about text. There are literacy standards 6 through 12 in science and in social studies, and they're reading targets in social studies and science, writing targets in social studies and science, and that's a stress this year. Of course, the integration of the instructional technology. We talked about the increased use of data, and all of our elementaries are actually all the way through are taking a new look at response to intervention. We have board policy, we have district policy, but it's several years old. It's time to look at it again in strength, especially with the new assessments we have. So, he talked about at the last meeting, engaging more teachers more often through our school-based teams and strengthening our teacher leadership. And this is something that is a board goal and something that's Mr. Hochreiter's goal, and we've been really working on. So that's where we are. It's a lot of work. You see, I've lived through this for so long. When you get these results every year, you're hopeful that it's going to be better, and it was a little better this year. But, I want to see, huge. And it takes time. And I know there are areas that we celebrate and areas that we're working on. So the rest of the presentations tonight are going to address what we're worried about, really. And we are. And, there's work to be done, for sure. But there's work that's been done. Okay. And we're welcoming back Kathy Connolly, which is so cool. She was a principal at BV for several years. And now she's the
6 years.
And a while ago.
97. Actually, this was the board meeting that I was appointed. In fact, I wore the suit I bought for my interview.
It still looks fabulous.
Thought that would be fun.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's now become a total favorite.
Yeah, so now my journey has brought me that I'm the Assistant Executive Director of the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center. So while I get a paycheck from Southern Westchester BOCES, I'm really part of the RIC and not directly for Southern Westchester BOCES. So we're going to load my... So what brings me here tonight is to create a better understanding of what LAP status really is, what LAP status is. So in my, the hat that I wear now, I work with the 62 districts of Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland. And my part of my areas of responsibility at the RIC are everything that has anything to do with instructional technology. All of the state reporting. Okay, good. So what do I push to go forward?
I'm just delivering it.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
How come I didn't get that?
One of the hours. So I have all of the state reporting. Anything that comes out of the student information system passes by me on its way up to the state. All of the verification reports that we use to help to make sure your data is accurate. All of the model schools, staff development offerings go through me. So I also get involved quite a bit with the accountability status of the school report cards and the district report cards. And LAP status is part of that, remember the old NCLB accountability? We're currently living under a waiver called the ESEA waiver, the Elementary Secondary Education Act. And under this waiver, in the past under NCLB, there were schools in need of improvement, districts in need of improvement, and then there were different levels of that. They did away with that and they created a much simpler system of accountability. So I'll talk about that. So LAP status, right now you have 2 schools in the district that have been identified as LAP status, and that's Frank G. Lindsay and the high school. And it's for a gap of the general education students and your special ed students. So this accountability data that we're looking at right now is the 2012-13 assessment year. So there's a delay of 1 year when they're doing accountability for report cards. And there are 4 accountability options. A school could be either in good standing, it could be in LAP status, it could be a focus school, or it could be a priority school. A focus school is one that really parallels the old improvement status. And then priority means that it's a really severe level. This district's been, or the school's been in trouble for quite a long time. This local assistance plan is exactly what it is. It's a self-study. It's saying you just have a blip in the radar. You need to find out what's going on, find out if it's something that could become systemic, and you're really doing it before it gets into the hands of the state. The state does not come down and partner with you in looking at this like they do with the focus or the priority status. So you're totally on your own on this, but it's something that really needs to be understood. There's 3 criteria that could cause lapse status. The first one is that you could fail to make annual yearly progress. I'm sure you've heard of AYP in the past, and that just means that you have not made enough progress in some given year to warrant being meeting AYP. It could also mean that you did not have a high enough participation rate, and a lot of schools and districts are holding their breath this year with those refusals to see how that's going to impact this kind of a status. SED has not said yet how they're going to handle that. The report cards have not been processed for the 13-14 school year, and many districts had significant refusals, which will be the first checkpoint for AYP is, did you have 95% participation? So they haven't revealed yet how they're going to handle that. Because upstate, I don't think, and in the western part of the state, I don't think it was such a big deal as it was in this area. The second category is the large gap between one of the identified subgroup categories and its counterparts. So it could be between special ed and gen ed, it could be between poverty and not poverty, and it could be English language learners and non-English language learners. The third category is that the school is a very, very low performing school. What happened here in Hen Hud is that you triggered the gap between special ed and gen ed. And I've had opportunity to look at quite a number of school districts, because districts that have never had a problem before are all of a sudden have this jumping up and nobody quite understood where it came from. I've tried to talk to SED to explain to them that I personally see it as a flaw in the waiver, but they are really held to the fact that the federal government accepted this waiver, and there's not too much we can do about it. However, this current year, that waiver sunsets, and the state has already applied for another waiver. And if that application goes through with the same way, many districts are subject to this same issue. And you could be again next year, or another district next year. So yes.
What's your opinion, the flaw?
What is my opinion?
What's the flaw in your opinion?
You'll see here what I feel. The flaw is, in a nutshell, if your general education students are scoring high enough, it leaves you wide open for a large gap. If your general ed students are at a mediocre level, the gap is not going to happen. So the higher performing your gen ed students are, the more vulnerable you are. So as we go through, you'll see this. So the performance index, all of this is based on a performance index, a comparison of the performance index between special ed and gen ed. The scale for performance index is 0 to 200. And it's based on the performance levels of the students that took the 3 through 8 ELA and math assessments, and also at the high school level on the Regents assessment. It's all about state assessments. If a student gets a level 1, they contribute 0 points to the calculation. If a student gets a level 2, they contribute 1 point. And if a student gets a level 3 or a level 4, they contribute 2 points. So a level 2 gets half credit. Level 3 and 4, there's no bonus for a level 4. They both contribute 2 points. If every student in a school were to get a 3 or a 4, then the PI would be 200 in the calculation. So that's the max, that's the goal. That's you're always being measured. Annual yearly progress is measuring a school's journey towards 200. And you'll see way back when I was principal, many schools were very close to that 200 in that generation of testing. And one of our previous commissioners believed that was not acceptable, so they raised the bar to have everybody working again towards the 200. So here's a list. This is a public list. I pulled it off of the state website, a list of all of the Westchester County districts that were identified for lapse status. And you say, wow, that's a reasonably short list. Keep in mind that many districts did not have, were not held to this criteria for special ed because they didn't have a critical mass of special ed students. You need to have 30 students in any subgroup in order to do the comparison. So you'll see in a few slides that in our past, many years, we did not have enough students to reach that critical mass. And many other districts as well continue to not have 30 students, for special ed students in their school at any given time. It all depends on the distribution, the programs that you have. You might have all of the tested special ed students in one of your elementary schools and the non-tested grade levels in another. I know way back when I was principal BV, we had the 3, 4, 5 special ed program, and Lindsay had the K2. So it all depends on how your school is structured. So let's look at the Lindsay data. And here, I kind of like to touch things, but here what you have going across the top is 5 school years. The most recent data that we can look at, because this is report card data, the most recent report card is the 2012-13 school year. And in this school year, we have the Gen Ed students performance index, the special ed student performance index, and the gap. And you can see that the Gen Ed students were at a 145, and the special ed students had a PI of 40, so the difference was over 100, and that is what triggered your lapse status. All of the 4 years before that, you did not have that critical mass of 30 students. So you may have had a gap or you might not have had a gap, but you didn't trigger it. So that's why all of a sudden this year you have this status. Looking at 2008, 2009, and 2009, 2010, you can see there that Lindsay's performance index was in the 190s, very close to that maximum of 200. That was the old generation of tests, the old cut points, the old tests. The summer of 2010, the commissioner, on the same test, changed the cut point without anybody knowing it or expecting it. He changed the cut points. And it remained that way for another 2 years. You see the 2010-11 and the 2011-12 data. It looks as though your performance index dropped. That is merely a factor of the change in cut points. And then 12-13 is now the Common Core data. So that you have those 2 years on the right are common, the middle 2 years are common, and then the one all the way on the left is a whole different generation of testing. So to see how this shakes out, that top chart is the same chart we just looked at. The bottom chart that's not showing up too well is New York State data. And I'm going to come over here and read these to you. So for the same years, when Lindsay was a 192, the state was 176. So Lindsay was about 20 percentile points higher. Again, the following year, 20 percentile points higher. 30 percentile points higher. 20 percentile points higher. And this past year, when you've been flagged for lapse status, you're 30 percentile points higher than the state. So your Gen Ed students did very, very well. And the state did not trigger lapse status, even though they had a very similar special ed performance index. You here had 40, the state had 47, and the performance index units is pretty much the same level, but they didn't trigger it because their Gen Ed students were not as high as Lindsay's Gen Ed students. Looking at, this is now achievement levels. So this is looking at actual test performance. you had, you can see here, you only had 11 special ed students tested, 12, 11, 28. So you had some kind of a program change which put more tested grade level special ed students at Lindsay. So you almost had an issue last year, but you didn't go over that count of 30. This year you had 39. And under the old generation of testing, you had a number of students in 2s and 3s, and they contributed to the performance index. Here you had 30 out of 39 in level 1. That is not atypical. 70-something% of the students, special ed students, statewide were level 1. This new test is disproportionately more difficult for English language learners and special ed students. Everybody is finding the test more difficult, but those two subgroups are finding it extremely difficult. It's going to take some time for us to realize how we're going to get these students, what kind of instruction they need, what's different about the learning that has to occur. It's not that they can't do it, it's we haven't had enough time with these assessments. And we don't have the assessments in our hands to work with after the fact of the test. We only have samples. Question?
Disproportionately difficult because of cognitive difficulties or for?
I think
language
it's presentation. It's so many different things for special ed students. It could be presentation. I think it really plays into some of the difficulties that are innate in the way special ed students learn. So it's just you saw everybody score drop, but special ed and English language learners plummeted across the state. So there's some bias built into it.
The test
They're
is very,
so
have you looked at the
dense
test?
with print.
They're very
The printing
complex.
is very dense. So that's why I'm saying some of it is presentation. And we've only seen these results for a year. I haven't had any opportunity to work with some of the special ed teachers in the area to find out what their impression is. But I do know that if it, we only have 70%, 30% of the students statewide got 3s and 4s. And it was much less than that for special ed students statewide.
5%.
5%, and for English language learners as well. So that's what I mean by disproportionately difficult. Okay, now let's just take a look, let's check in with math. And we don't have an issue with math. You only triggered lapse status for ELA, and you can see that you had a gap of 79. You had your critical mass, you had a gap of 79 in math. You had 61% of your special ed students get a level 1, again, comparable to what we're seeing statewide. And let's turn our focus now to the high school. High school had the same thing. When you're talking about high school accountability, you're really talking about cohort now. You're not talking about 3, 4, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade combined. It's always been very difficult to reach that critical mass of 30 at the high school level. For some reason you did in 12-13. I don't know if you did in 13-14. But take a look at your 9-10 and in school years 9-10 and 8-9. You were and looking at across the board, you've always been so very close to that perfect score of 200 at the high school level. And it leaves you wide open for this gap. This gap occurred, this ESEA waiver occurred for the first time in the 2011-12 school year. And you did not have the correct critical mass there. Looking at the statewide results, you're 20%, 20%, 20%, 30%, and 80%. 80 points higher than the state. And the state, now when the state is looking at data with gaps consistently in the 40 to 60 range, they probably assumed a gap of 100 is a safe place to go in their model. But they didn't account for the high-performing school districts in Westchester.
Great.
Because a 100-point gap is very easy to get to. So looking at your ELA actual test results we don't see levels coming out of Regents exams, but a level 1 is a 0 to 54 on the Regents. Level 2 is 55 to 64, level 3 is 65 to 84, and level 4 is 85 to 100. So they do break it down into level 1. So you do have, and this is not the Common Core Regents. Common Core Regents was given for the first time this past school year. So this is all the old Regents data. And you did have a different kind of response in 12-13 than you had seen in the past. Your math at the high school was very close to having a gap issue. Again, because the gen ed performance was so high. And in the math test, again, this is not Common Core algebra, it's all the old algebra. So that cohort of special ed students did find testing more difficult than you had seen in the past. Looking at your other schools, why didn't BV, Furnace Woods, or the middle school trigger lapse status? Well, in BV and Furnace Woods, they did not have the critical mass of special ed, so they did not have to, they didn't have to go through the criteria check. And in the middle school, you came really close. So that, it's not an issue that's isolated to Lindsay or to the high school. It's across the board. This is, I had a group of superintendents in Westchester ask me to look at the middle school data. And so these are, when you look in the newspaper and they produce the results of the districts and they do it in order, these are the top 10 districts. 10 or 12, what I did here. So these were the top districts, and this is where I was presenting to them the susceptibility of the small high-performing districts to this issue. So this is their size of students tested. So you have some very, very tiny schools, you've got some mid-range schools and some larger schools in here. And their gen ed performance indices are pretty high here. Their special ed actually get pretty high as well, but look at the gaps. These two actually triggered lapse status, and look at how many came so very close. So right now the superintendents are lobbying to bring this to the attention of the state education department in light of the fact that the ESEA waiver is up for approval again. And my conclusion in looking at your data specifically is we should always be looking at special ed programs to ensure that as the instruction and our demands change, that we're meeting the needs of the students. But in my opinion, lapse status is not a valid indicator of a problem. It's an indicator of a flaw in the design of the waiver. So it doesn't tell me what kind of an issue you would have or if there really is a valid issue. It's you are required to dig into your test results and to do this self-study, and you may or may not find things that you want to correct. But this waiver, this lapse status, is not, in my opinion, something that you should put a lot of resources into. The resources should be in reviewing your programs. And I already told you that the Lower Hudson Council school superintendents are looking at this as an unintended consequence of a waiver that's working in many other ways. So that's all the presentation I have for tonight. Yep.
Does the critical mass change in proportion?
No, it's always been 30.
So it's just
It's a statistical number that they use as the smallest. And for participation rate, you have to have 40 students at a subgroup. Any questions?
Ms. Connolly, could you explain, in addition, thank you for explaining that so well, when you said what the lab is going to entail, when you say analyzing the scores, what exactly will that entail? And then the second part of the question is what kind of support should we be looking at once we see what kind of data we have?
I've not walked through the lapse status with a district before, but it includes, there's a lot of paperwork. I was talking to an assistant superintendent that had gone through it. It doesn't get submitted to the state. There's no review on anyone's part. You have to submit your progress. You have to submit your plan of what you're going to do. So you're going to be looking at your own data Remember, this is all based on state assessment, so you're going to have to gather data that you've been collecting at the district level, and look at it and see, is this cohort of special ed students having an issue, and are you meeting their needs? So I really don't know this. If you go to the website,
We've started the process.
you did.
Yes. We have a new director of People Personnel Services who had the fortunate or misfortunate experience with this in a previous district. So she's worked on lab status before. And also our BOCES, as always, is being supportive. And Donna has a group together, and Jim is creating a group. I think they're all here. And a team is going to BOCES to begin just to get a kickoff of the process. And we have templates from other districts.
It seems like it would be beneficial to get very specific data, because we know these tests are very difficult, and we know for various reasons they're much more difficult for students with any kind of disabilities because of the complexity and the just the richness and the rigor. So
And it's different for them.
It's different for each student too.
There are very specific rubrics that, so it's not just narrative, so that, when you have a rubric, it's directed. And so they'll be directed to look at specific information.
And then out of that, will we get ideas for what more supports we need, what kind of classes, what kind of teaching, more universal design, more.
Since it's so self-directed, it's maybe Lynn can speak more to that, what value she got out of it in a prior district. So I just do the metrics, so I haven't gotten involved in the process after that. Nobody likes my part, but I do.
So is anybody addressing the way that kids feel when they perform disproportionately on these tests and they're not successful?
I just met with Mayapac's teachers earlier today, and that was the same question, is, how are we making kids feel? I'm not the state. I'm a middleman. I totally agree with you. What does it feel like for kids to get these scores because they internalize it? And I remember, one of the students that I had at BV was crying because he got 1 and didn't think he was going to get to go to college. So they're young, they're so impressionable, and we worry about that impact. I don't think that the commissioner really turns a blind eye to that. I think a lot of this is driven by another agenda that the state has. I don't know, how to really answer that question, because I never get involved in that level of discussion. That's the commissioner with the superintendents that certainly bring that to the table every time they get a chance to do that. So I'm not the right person to ask that question.
Are you aware of it at any level? Because that's an important question to ask, because even at the high school level, you've got kids that can't pass the regents, and they can't even get a local diploma because they can't pass the English and the math. What's that?
I hear it in every single district that I go to, that there's the worry of what we're doing to our kids emotionally in all of this.
The other piece is this data is now almost 18 months old. And so we're looking at achievement for how kids performed in 3rd grade, and they're now in 5th grade, or 5th grade and they're now in 7th grade. So there's a relevant, we as superintendents raised the relevance question. We were with the commissioner yesterday. He kept his comments very short because he had to run down to New York City because Arnie Duncan was in town touring schools. But we had a session last night with the deputy commissioner and talked about this exact issue. And they actually asked us to send them our data. So they're not even, the state's not even breaking it down to this granular level. So we will do that. There's a group of us that we talked about that are going to go and meet with the deputy commissioner and say, how is it that there are schools on that list that are reward schools? The high school I mentioned earlier recognized, yet we're slapped on this other policy end because of a calculation that no one really knows how the state came up with it. The 100-point gap sounded right, but
seems pretty arbitrary to me.
Yeah.
And if you look at the statewide data, it looked like 100 would work. It was 40 points above where
the state was performing, so it probably looks good to people that were trying to pick a number.
Great. I just had a question for
Wanna go
Alice.
back to Art?
Oh, yeah, I just had a question too for Alice on back to the
Okay.
elementary presentation. You identified a lot of areas of growth, which is very helpful and positive, but then you mentioned the areas of concern, and we do recognize that, and we can see from some of the data. But it looked to me, for example, the third grade was a concern, which is understandable because of the age of the students partially. But can you identify other areas of concern? And then what as a board can we do for resources? And where
Well,
can we
I
put in
have a specific
more
area
supports?
of concern in math, and having a math coach in, we've identified the area, and that's a huge support that you've provided for us. And just
Any
I
other
guess living
other
through it
areas? I noticed
with us.
I noticed the third grade ELA too.
The ELA is we knew going in that we put tremendous effort into math. It was so hard and new for everyone, and we saw results in math. And we're doing the same in ELA this year. So we've spent a lot of money on these materials, and we will continue to spend money on professional development and support for teachers in using these new materials. So that's all along support from you.
Anything else that was identified as a specific concern, grade level or middle school looks like it's okay, but anything else that we need to pay particular attention to, do you think?
Know that we have our eyes on the same areas of concern you do, and we are asking for the PD. If you want to get specific, and if this is a good time for a plug, everyone would like some release time for PD. We'd like to get back to some of the half-a-days we had.
That's professional development.
Professional development, where teachers can work together on specific professional development without using subs and without diminishing instructional time. Obviously, it's a half a day that kids go home, but it's not scurrying for subs everywhere.
I think
for
that's a
this
good
PD time. So that would be a tremendous support, and something that our teachers and our administrators are like, where are the half days? We had a problem with it a few years back, and we cut back, but we really need the release time.
I think the New York Times in the summer in a magazine had an article on math in the Common Core and why it was so difficult, why we needed the new standards, but why it was so difficult. And one of the points they made was that we had this just thrust upon us, and there was no professional development, no training anywhere in any state, really.
Right.
But New York was particularly poor.
Right, particularly poorly done, but we found, through, again, Southern Westchester's BOCES, a wonderful consultant. And we used subtime to cover teachers last year for the support in math because we didn't have the time.
And then
So-
can you give teachers programs they can learn on their own? Can you give things they can take home, or as aside from it's hard to take out
Sure.
instructional time.
Sure, there are things that, it could be in service, could be things of that nature, but this new way of teaching mathematics is not something that, you're going to get up online and figure it out. Teachers need to talk to each other, and they need to experience the teaching of it together. It's brand new.
Yeah.
Of course, you worry less about our secondary math teachers. They were math majors. But our elementary teachers, it's very rare to have a math major who's an elementary teacher. So, it's a lot of instruction.
So I know when the Common
Thanks,
Core was
Mary.
implemented, we were worried about certain grades that we're going to need a lot of backfilling, so to
We have
speak.
backfilling. We have,
And
yes.
have those grades performed worse than expected, better than expected,
Well,
about the same?
when you look,
Notice
when
the
you look
difference?
comparatively across the county, everyone's in the same boat.
Right.
So comparatively, we're working hard. Everyone's working hard. It's when our rank just stays where it is. And yet, it was easiest for the kindergarten teachers to implement. It was okay for the first grade teachers. Second had some backfilling to do. Fifth grade was tough. Sixth grade, seventh grade, tough. Because all those years of a different kind of teaching. But when you ask the commissioner why he didn't phase it in, which you do with many programs, that's 8 years of kids who are having a subpar program. You had to just bite the bullet and jump in. So, we gave the best the professional development we could, and the best time we could, and we thank you for that. And we see progress in math. If you go into elementary classrooms, you see progress in math. We're not there yet. I mean, Donna was describing a situation where she went into 3 of the same lessons in 3 different 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, whatever, classrooms, all taught differently. You know, the same content. And that's where we're getting there, but we're not there yet. We still need the support.
And
Thank you for the math coaches to help provide that support.
And can we consider a math night for the middle school as well? Because just to explain.
Of course we can.
Yeah, there might be something to consider.
Easy for me to say with no middle school people here, but of course we can.
It's their own fault then.
Exactly.
Just keep
Yeah.
going.
So anyway, thank you. Good questions,
thank
good
you.
support.
Thank you.
And, you know, we'll continue to make progress.
I have one philosophical question. When she talked about the trigger point for 30 kids, you know, it seems like the trigger point at Frank G was when we put the ABC program there. And it was a little bit, but it's a
There's more to it
philosophical
than that.
thing. That's the proper place. And those kids need to all be together to have a core group and a core teacher, correct?
Absolutely.
So that's the right place for it to be.
And
So
what's
in a way,
more,
we have to look at it as
the whole school has embraced those children. And every teacher in that school has not only had training in the behavioral work you do with kids who learn differently or react differently, but you know the cafeteria people know how to work with these kids, and it's just beautiful to watch the children watch. You know, the whole school knows that these are our kids and we love them and they need a little bit of extra care. And if you hear some screaming or whatever, that's what you hear, and you move on. And to have that, could we train 3 different buildings and split these kids up? Sure, we could, but it would be diminished. It's just such a positive atmosphere in the whole school. You know, the music teachers, the art teachers, the PE teachers, they all know how best to work with these kids, and that's part of why it's so successful.
So there's a core competency built within the buildings and the teachers and a culture around.
And you know,
Thank you.
to arrange our schools so we can avoid lapse status, that's, I don't know.
The state will change-
Philosophically, I'm very opposed to that.
The state
You
will
know,
probably
like-
change it next year.
Yes, right. You kind of suck it up and do the right thing for kids. Okay. Frenchie?
All right. As the board knows, last winter, spring, we commissioned a study of our PPS and Special Education Department and Program. Judy Hirschhorn, who led that study, came and gave the board an update on April 9th of 2014. Lynn came on as director right around Memorial Day and has taken the plan and is here to provide an update on the status of the PPS plan.
Well, thanks for inviting me here this evening. Board of Education members, Superintendent Joe Hockray, Assistant Superintendent Alice, my fellow administrative colleagues and staff and faculty and parents. I'm glad to be here to present to you the plan moving forward from Judith's recommendations. What we'll do tonight is we'll review her recommendations, and if I don't speak loud enough, let me know. We'll review her recommendations from last year that she presented to you in the board meeting. I'll present an action plan moving forward, and we'll have time for discussion and any questions that you may have. Judith's recommendations are bulleted up here. She talked very much about reorganizing from a special education office to a pupil personnel office. And what that means is that pupil personnel has a special education department in it, but it also has related service providers such as guidance counselors, psychologists, social workers, OT, PT, and speech, who really form the whole pupil personnel office and department, and being proactive and preventative and really us as helping folks, supporting our building principals and kind of a wraparound services for the academics in each of the buildings. So just in your thinking moving forward, don't say special education department, say pupil personnel department, please. Also, Judith called or asked for us to look at the administrative structure. Currently, I am the director of PPS. Caroline is the assistant director. She put out there to have a elementary chairperson and a secondary chairperson. I put TBD up there, to be determined, because I think that's Joe and your conversation at the board level on how that's going to be structured moving forward. She also talked about adding a full-time secretary to our office. We currently have 2. One just unfortunately left us. She asked us to look at really defining the roles of the secretaries and each one of us in the department, and developing procedures according to timelines, and really focus on some fiscal aspects as well in our department. We, years ago, had a procedural manual for pupil personnel. We need to bring that back out and spiffy it up. In addition to that, she asked us to continue to work on refining the integrated co-teaching classes or program overall. She asked us to explore options district-wide for Tier 2 and Tier 2 interventions. And what that really means is it's response to intervention, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. She asked, as always, and we do this, to continue to monitor outplacements of our students. It's important that when we have a CSC meeting that we're talking about the least restrictive environment and always moving and hopefully moving our kids back to be here at Hen Huz School District, and to continue to monitor achievement of students with disabilities and tailor interventions to meet their needs. And that falls in line with some of that testing and where we're going to go as well in our work. So I really saw it as 2 major focuses, from her recommendations to moving forward. And the first one is, talking about our office structure and making sure that it's high efficiency, service-oriented, and fiscally responsible. And we call it a pupil personnel office, not a special ed office. And then the second major area of focus is really connecting program to instruction and assessment. So again, her proposing us look at integrated co-teaching, response to intervention, data on student achievement, our referral process, our outside placements, and more. Also within this as well, she talked about the 504 process, the 504 accommodation plan process, and where does that belong? Should it be shifted from the PPS office to building level teams with administrative oversight and obviously our support as we move forward? So how will we make her audit recommendations become a reality? Well, I developed an action plan which is in your packet. It's a Gannett doc, which is a step-by-step approach to looking at all of the areas of her recommendations. Each one of those tenets in the plan, in the action plan, require an additional action plan to make sure that we're following that to fidelity. In addition to that, talking with groups of people about the plan, talking with you here this evening, talking with my fellow administrators, talking with teachers and related service providers and parents. And I've had the opportunity to speak a little bit with administrators and a little bit with the SEPTA families as well as the PTA Council. But lots more information needs to be out there and lots more input needs to be gathered for the plan to plan. And again, I have to reiterate that throughout this whole process, Judith called for, when we're making these kinds of systems changes, that we have open and ongoing communication and we're monitoring what we're doing. If we don't have an all-in approach to the change process, it won't be successful. So it's very, very important that we have everybody's input as we go through each of these processes to make the changes on that Gannett doc. This is an action plan that I just want to show the public. Board members have this plan before them. This takes each one of Judith's recommendations and it breaks it down a little bit farther so that we have it in a task format, we have it in detailed steps, who's responsible and who's supposed to be a part of those conversations, with timelines and with follow-up. And there's about 11 areas there, and they all focus on those recommendations that she provided in her audit. That's good. Yeah, you could actually I just wanted to show that. I'm not going to go through. Thank you. So, I'm going to need you again on this. So, back to focus number 1, reorganization of the special ed office to a pupil personnel office. I've developed two things with our office staff to really clearly define our roles, and we have much more work to do. But if you could just click on that for me. This is pupil personnel department now in our district. It involves school counselors, psychologists, social workers, speech therapists, occupational therapists. If you move it over to the right there, you can see it's by building and the staff members and their time in the building, an FTE allotment, our special ed department and the teachers and what they teach. And then in the PPS office, some of our roles and responsibilities that we're responsible for so that we're clearly defining what we do. And I want to put this out on our website now as we move forward so that it helps parents or anybody who has questions how to navigate our office, and it's much more clearer. Okay, you can click off that. On the next one, you'll see a calendar of duties. And each one of us in our department, Caroline, myself, the secretaries, have developed a calendar of duties by the month. This clearly defines our roles in our department. If we have to move things around as we move forward with the secretaries, we know what month it is in and what task needs to be done. And so this was a project that we did very early on, and we continue to refine this. This worked so well when recently one of our secretaries left and we had somebody come in, and she was able to see exactly what needs to be done within the month within our department. And we're going to continue to do things like this so that it's very clear about what we're doing. Okay, you can click off that. I think as we move forward, as we're prepping for the education budget, plan and budget, that we talk about the administrative structure and we talk about the additional secretary. I know that's in the times we're adding staff, that's a big budget constraint, but we'll need to have those conversations very early on and probably in November so that we're planning for that in our budget and moving forward if that is what the board and Superintendent Joe Hochreiter would like. Also in motion now is being fiscally prudent is the Medicaid process and the STAC process. We have an action chart for the Medicaid process so that we can get funds back on Medicaid eligible students. That's a work in progress still, but we've been going to training. We have been working with local BOCES, and we're getting that process in order. In addition to that, the STACs are student tracking forms of our kids in high-cost schools, and it's absolutely a must that we complete those STACs, and we have been doing them for our high-cost kids so we get aid back on the kids. So those are two things that are in progress now and working. Some of it is my doing and working with my hands, but I'll shift as I can move forward. We're going to be developing that procedural manual as she suggested for student services, but it really is an ongoing document as we're revising forms and we're revising procedures. By the end of the year, we'll have a document for you for representing student services. The next area is a very important area to talk about, and that's the 504 accommodation plans being moved from the building level, or from the PPS or special ed office to the building level. You know, we have to have a lot of buy-in for that to happen, and a lot of work needs to be done, and we need to be comfortable with the process. It's going to involve, if we move in that direction, it's going to involve professional development for the building level teams. Even though they've already been in the 504 process, it's different when it's in their building. We're going to need to provide embedded support for the teams in the areas of how to do a 504 plan, how to talk about the accommodations, what is the legislation that is involved that we must follow, what makes it a very sound document that we must follow, because it still is a legal document. But 504s are for accommodation plans are for students in general education that do have a disability and need accommodations in the general ed setting. So as we move forward, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done in that area and a lot of support. And the last one focuses on data. And this goes with everything. As we are looking at data in the district, we need to be focusing on student achievement, programs and placements, our referrals, whether it be at the building level or at the parent level, and also our staffing. So I see that as the first major area of focus, and that's the PPS office. The next part is the second area of focus, and that's connecting program to instruction to assessment, and that's what we've been talking about all this evening. I plan to go out and observe, along with Caroline, all of the integrated co-teaching classes in the district, and that's K through 12. What's happening in those classes? What are the resources for the classes? What's the models of instruction and the level of rigor of instruction? It's not an evaluation, it's an observation, so that I can come back and provide an assessment with that. In addition to that, we're in the 4th year for the ABC classes, and we should be doing a program review. How are our kids achieving in the ABC classes? Again, what's the instruction like? What are the resources and the supports provided to those kids? And we need to take a look at those. In the area of response to intervention, I think we need to step back a bit. Judith talked about Tier 2, and Tier 2 is so important. It's such important work because obviously Tier 1 is the classroom and what interventions we provide in the core setting. Tier 2 is smaller in design, 3 to 5 students. And then Tier 3 is the highest intensity of instruction or dealing with something, dealing with a student with intensive targets to improve them prior to going to a special ed referral.
Tier 2 push in or pull out?
It should be pulled out or working with smaller groups, maybe 3 to 5 students.
Like a resource room?
It could be reading. It could be a reading, pull out reading. Okay. Anybody want to add to that?
We only have it in reading. We don't have any other pull-out program in, unless I'm wrong. We don't have it in math.
With our math coaches, there will be some combination of support in math, but it's not like you're assigned math pull-out for the year. It'll be, it'll be based on assessment to assessment.
Children who are at a Tier 2 that need that sort
That's
of
up to
intervention will be able to have that building level service if we don't have it.
I just said we had it.
Okay.
So while we're looking at those tiers and while we're providing embedded support to the IST teams, we call them, or the RTI teams, we really need to provide more tools for our teachers and for their toolkit. And the tools and the interventions need to be in the academic areas, the behavioral areas, and even the social emotional area in addressing our student needs and targeting interventions. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in there, and I think that it needs to be done at a level in which we are speaking to our teachers and faculty meetings. I'm happy to go out and do that kind of work. Carolyn and I being a part of the IST process to talk about, or the RTI process to kind of be an extra sounding board for coming up with interventions across those 3 areas. And then most importantly of all tonight, as Kathy and Alice have both talked about, how are our students achieving in these programs and how do we close that gap in performance between all of our students? And so by going into the classrooms, by looking at our data, by talking with teachers and what they're seeing, and really, putting that all together and having conversations about that, hopefully moving forward, we're going to be addressing instruction and raising those the level of instruction for our kids in special ed as well. So I wanted to be brief, and I hope I did that in a very short amount of time. If there's any discussion that you'd like to have or any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
I had a question, Lynn. In Judith's report, under criteria and procedures and services for students, she notes the preface is the interviews pointed to a lack of understanding and lack of agreement on a variety of fronts related to services for both special education and students who struggle. The district should consider establishing committees to develop procedural manuals for CSC 504s.
Yep.
So is there going to be a formation of perhaps a committee? For example, the Code of Conduct, when we developed it, we had a really, really good input from committees. So I think it would be useful. And we had talked about doing a committee for students who struggle anyway.
Yep.
So I think it would be, wouldn't have to be meetings every week or every month, but to have at least some meetings during the year.
I think that's an awesome suggestion. I think we're going to be doing some good work out of our K-12 related services group. We meet once a month, and it's all the psychologists and speech therapists and social workers in the district, and that has been a great team already to begin our work in the services component of that. But we that's a broader look at it.
We really need parents. You need
Yep.
parents on these committees. So I think that's
a great suggestion.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
we really need that.
Yep.
So, and I think it would be, a supportive, confidential committee, so you could share things that you might not want to share.
Yep.
So I think that would be kind of essential, because we don't want to just have a template that just sits on a
Exactly.
shelf somewhere.
Yep. And we want to make it transparent too, as much as we can put stuff on the website so that parents can navigate the system and can get some answers to the questions by going on our website is very powerful as well. So we could put that manual, once it's completed, on our website too.
Okay. And then the second question I had, a lot of us are still, I know you explained it very well, but we're concerned about the transition from 504 to the building level. And you explained there's going to be a lot of training, but I think we really have to have a lot of monitoring, and this has to be done very carefully, and a lot of professional development. So we'll just if you could keep us updated on that.
I think that at any time, if you'd like to have me come back and report where we are with the action plan, I think that's important. But you are exactly right about the 504s. I don't want to make a change. I want to say I don't want to make a change unless people are ready to make that change, that they fully feel that they're able to do the 504s at the building level, which some of our administrators have been in a process in their previous districts of doing 504s at the building level. So they've had the experience.
The way Judith explained it at the SEPTA in May, she said basically, well, it's not working that well now, honestly, so it's better to have more attention this way, just try it this way. And then she said it would give sort of more detail and it would free up also the directors,
Right.
But I think one of the major concerns is monitoring. And right now, the guidance counselors are doing a lot of the monitoring, and they don't, always have training. So we need to make sure there's just a lot of monitoring, because these are
Caroline's been very helpful with that this year, and making sure that, with the 504s, the classroom teacher at the elementary is basically the case manager for the 504, and then at the middle and high school level, the guidance counselors. But as I begin to work with guidance counselors in the area of professional development, that is something that we will talk about and work on as well.
Okay. And then just on the RTI, we had talked about this a little bit in policy as well. The use of RTI for behavioral, social, emotional concerns is very interesting, and it's new, and
it is
it's not codified in the law. It's not, it's not. There's not really a model for it, and there's some concerns about it, because you don't want it to be. To stop a student who needs to be classified, and then there's some things that are hard to measure. So it's an interesting idea, and I know we're going to get some support from BOCES, Joe, is that what you said? So it's interesting to monitor, and we could, work on that, but it's an area that's, again, needs a lot of careful.
It is, and it can run in the gamut of what types of programs exist at school, or what kind of daily interactions exist. So it runs that full gamut to really looking at social emotional needs. I know Joe is working with superintendents in the area. I have a listserv that I put out. What are you doing with RTI, especially in the areas of social emotional concerns? And I didn't get any responses back, because it's so they're like, wow, I know that it's a new concept, but it's really not a new concept. It's about it's about addressing our kids' social emotional needs in our buildings.
Yeah, we could be, and one of the goals would be to have a new program in this district and develop something that could be used in other districts. So that's it's just there's a lot of caution about it too, just how it's used.
Sure.
So that's great. And the last thing, I'm sorry, I just thought of this, Carol, because we forgot to mention home instruction when we talked about policy.
Oh,
yeah. So we had talked.
Something else.
Yeah, so we were looking at our home, and this is a little bit unrelated to your presentation, but during our policy committee meeting, we had a long discussion about home instruction and how we really need more providers. We need that to be monitored more too. So it's just something to keep an eye on, because those kids are also children who could be at risk too. So we just need to keep an eye on that.
I developed a handy-dandy manual on that, and it really worked out well in one of the districts that I worked in, and so I plan on bringing that forward here, because we do have kids on home instruction, and we have to look at who's instructing them, what are the processes. That high schoolers get 2 hours a day, elementary get an hour a day. When testing comes up, how do we facilitate Regents exams when kids are out on home instruction? So it's a big area. It really is.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
I think we needed more to look at just having more providers as well was another issue we had. But we'll mention the policy at the next meeting probably.
Thank you for those suggestions. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
I think one of the themes we've heard through the three presentations tonight are about instruction, data, and time, and making sure that we have really good data on kids in addition to test scores. And the commissioner again yesterday re-emphasized his point that that's just one measure and shouldn't be the only measure, but to build a robust data system so we can answer the question of which students learned really well, which ones didn't, and why or why not. That leads to staff development. That leads to a discussion around time. But I think the way the Common Core was implemented everywhere, districts and teachers were focused on what's new, what is the content, what is new that I have to teach and when I have to teach it, and there weren't conversations about how we were teaching, and that really has got to be a focus for certainly this year and coming years. If we have a level of reliability that the Common Core is here and that the assessments are going to be written in a similar way, our conversations as a school community become really about instruction and sharing those best practices. So that's the next phase, whether it's PPS audit or the LAP plan or 3 through 8 data. It's talking about what good instruction looks like.
I'd like to see us take a role, an advocacy role, in the testing for the special education. I know one of the regents wrote an editorial in Local a couple of weeks ago about that issue, about the negative effects of testing of how difficult the test is. And since Kathy brought it up, I think we should take a role in talking about that or trying to get something done, because it's a strain for both the children and the families. If the test is that disproportionately difficult across the state, there's something wrong with the test. And whether it is presentation or instruction, you need to be talking about it's not so much that they're failing, it's that how it makes the kids and families feel. And that's a big issue out there, and I think we should take a role somehow in talking
And
about it.
the way it was implemented in New York, it was just so poorly done where it was thrust upon with no training, and then it was really geared toward college ready, not as much career ready. And that's
Well, I've seen
yeah.
things like,
Yeah.
even in testing, like if you have a child who has poor short-term memory, if they have to flip back and forth, they can get confused on a test. And so you're going to have a test that's duplex, and they got to flip from page to page. You know, if it were just printed on single sheets, they could spread it out and look here and right here.
One of the teachers was explaining to me that this is what her classroom sounded like through the whole test. And so, for a child who needs to concentrate,
If it was on the computer, scroll up, scroll down, scroll up, scroll down, go this way, that way.
right,
Yes.
right, it's ill thought out.
So we will keep you apprised with the PPS update, and that's probably a good idea, Charles, is to see what level, to which degree maybe the Putnam Westchester Boards Association or the LOHUD Boards Association would take on those issues.
And thank you, Lynn, and the PPS department. This is a lot of work that all of you have undertaken in a very short time. We appreciate it.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Thank you to all the presenters. That was. I'm tired just reading this. Doing it's going to be. It's an impressive document. That's for certain. That brings us to audience comments. Come on up, state your name and where you live, and let us know what you need.
My name is Rachel Fenty. I live in Burbank. I have 3 kids in the district. I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a special ed 2nd grader for twins. I have a few things I'd like to say first. I'm very insulted that you would think a group of parents would opt their kids out based upon somebody going on TV to tell them to do that. We had a forum in February where Dr. Peg Lussick came and spoke. We had 30 parents from this district attend that meeting. They all went into those tests well informed on where that data goes, what's done with it, and how New York State uses it. I can guarantee you if those 30 parents were here and they heard you say that, they'd be really upset. Also, I would like to touch upon this 100-point curve or this 100-point difference. You have special ed kids that learn their own individual ways. I have a second grader who can rattle off math equations in his sleep, but he gets in front of those number bonds and he has complete meltdowns. So now next year you're going to test him on number bonds, and he's going to be sitting there like this, and he's going to be under the table. He's going to be through the roof because that's not how his brain works. And to have a system that can only teach a child one way, I think is disgusting. And to be grading them and testing them using this data and labeling schools, I think is insane. The other thing I'd like to just add really quick, my bride's here. If parents can go online, there's a website for SEPTA that you can sign a petition. It has to be in by Monday. I can give you the website right now. It's really quick. It's sap2016.org FERC process. Just if you go online real quick, fill it out, that'd be great. So that's all I have to say. I am very upset that this is just the way things are still progressing. We're not making any leeway for these special ed kids, and I'm looking forward to being more involved with SEPTA this year and seeing what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Anybody else? She's talking there or something. Give that girl a microphone.
The microphone doesn't work.
Good evening, my name is Theodora Kretsulas. I am co-president of SEPTA, and thank you for your review. Our concern, our biggest concern, and it was also mentioned by the board, is the one comment or the one recommendation would be bringing the 504 to a building level service. We do understand that it doesn't work well, but we were looking at maybe improving what we have, not changing it. At SEPTA, we really do not feel comfortable having it on a 504 building level service. We feel, even though with everything and all the professional development that might go into it, especially in the high school, I feel uncomfortable, nor do I think it's ethical to have teachers telling other teachers how to implement and differentiate in their classes within their 504 plans. I found throughout the years, as speaking as personal experience and with other parents, each teacher reads a 504 differently, sees it differently, and implements it differently. And sometimes it's not across the board the same. And it's kind of difficult having your peer tell you how to teach in your class. And that's one of the things I find an obstacle that's going to be difficult to overcome, especially in the high school level. I could see it working more in the elementary level. I mean, I could see where there's the building, the principal, but I have been in multiple meetings of my own and friends and neighbors who've asked me because of who I am. I haven't seen the principal once in one of the meetings. He's not, it doesn't mean that he might not want to come. I find that within what I'm looking for is even with their professional development, will they have time and adequate time to work and do these meetings appropriately and concisely and informative? I found that in my previous experiences that I've walked into the meetings and walked out and had to call the pupil personnel because I wasn't happy with the meeting on a building level service. And I tend to be a little bit more educated, so I feel that I felt that way. There are many more parents walking out and not knowing what to do with the next step. and who to speak to. So again, if we're going to go down this road, please, 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 before anything is implemented, that all the check boxes are checked off, because I can't see another child fall through the cracks and struggle. And I personally, again, I'll bring it on a personal note, I had my daughter the last 2 years refuse to go to her own meeting because she didn't want to be in it, because she felt that it was somehow demeaning to her. And she shouldn't feel that in her own meetings. So I kind of look at it and say, if we're going to do that and bring it at a building level service, please, 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 look at it in the academic, look at it in support, but look at it at the emotional point also. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that felt that way, especially in the high school. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, that brings us to board comments, new business.
Just a reminder for everyone, the large audience, I think the Spectra deadline for written submissions is the 27th of, is it the 29th? 29th, okay, the 29th. So just keep that in mind, because if you didn't get a chance to go to the meeting, and written submissions are very effective, and this is something obviously that affects our community, and it's a good idea to write something.
Okay. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from tomorrow. It's back on Wednesday, October 8th. It will be here in the library. Our meet and greets will be starting somewhere mid-October. The 7th, I think it's the 16th or 18th. We will have our next meeting first. But other than that, that is the end of this meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor? Aye.